I never imagined a simple phone call could shatter my peaceful life in seconds. As a 32-year-old real estate agent who had built everything from scratch, I thought I understood family dynamics. I was wrong. My mother's voice trembled with excitement that Tuesday morning. They had sold our family home of 30 years and given most of the money, $280,000, to my brother Jake for his failing business. Then came the bombshell: they were moving in with me temporarily, tomorrow. When I hesitated, Mom's tone sharpened. Don't be selfish, Raquel. Family helps family. We've already given away our house keys. Before I could respond, my doorbell rang. I peeked through the window. My parents stood there, surrounded by suitcases, smiling expectantly. Looking at my parents standing on my doorstep, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. The 3-bedroom house they were about to enter represented everything I'd worked for over the past decade. After college, I'd started at the bottom of the real estate industry, working 60-hour weeks, saving every penny and learning the market inside out. No one had handed me anything. 4 years ago, I'd finally saved enough for a down payment on this modest but beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Every piece of furniture, every paint color, every decision had been mine alone. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. As the oldest child and only daughter, I'd been raised to be independent and responsible from an early age. My brother Jake, 2 years younger, received different treatment entirely. Where I got tough love, Jake got second chances. Where I got practical gifts, Jake got extravagant ones. Where I got lectures about saving money, Jake got bailouts. Over the years, Jake had launched 5 different sure thing businesses: a food truck, an app development company, a CrossFit gym, a premium dog food delivery service, and most recently, a cryptocurrency consulting firm. Each venture followed the same pattern: initial excitement, promises of huge returns, requests for investment from family, then spectacular failure, followed by more requests for money to try something new. My parents, especially my father, never seemed to learn. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Surprise! My mother embraced me tightly while my father began hauling suitcases across my threshold without waiting for an invitation. Mom, Dad, I thought you were coming tomorrow, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We couldn't wait to start our new adventure together, Mom beamed. Your father retired last month, as you know, and this is perfect timing. I forced a smile while mentally calculating how to handle this situation. I loved my parents, but I also knew their tendency to take over. Setting boundaries would be essential. You can stay for 2 weeks while you look for a new place, I said firmly. I've got a busy schedule with clients, so I need the house quiet during working hours. The guest room has its own bathroom, and you're welcome to use the kitchen, but please clean up after yourselves. Mom's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. Of course, dear. We won't be any trouble. Dad was already examining my living room. This wall would look better with the TV on the other side, and these curtains aren't practical. We should change them. I bit my tongue. Dad, I like my house the way it is. Please don't make any changes without asking me first. He waved dismissively. You've always been so particular, Raquel. As the day progressed, more and more of their belongings appeared. What I had expected to be a suitcase or two expanded to boxes, furniture pieces, and family heirlooms. They were moving in, not visiting. Where should we put the china cabinet? Dad asked, as 2 movers struggled through my front door with an enormous antique piece. What, you can't keep that here, I protested. This is temporary, remember? Mom patted my arm. We couldn't bear to part with certain things. Just for now, until we figure out our next step. That evening, as I prepared for bed, exhausted from rearranging my home to accommodate their unexpected volume of possessions, my phone rang. It was my brother, Jake. Hey, sis, heard the news. Can't wait to see the new family compound tomorrow. Mom says the guest room is great, but I might need to crash sometimes too when I work late in your area. I ended the call quickly, a sense of dread building. The next morning, I overheard my mother on the phone in the kitchen. Yes, Virginia, the move went smoothly. We're all settled in at Raquel's now. It's a blessing to combine households at our age. No, we don't need our own place. This is a permanent arrangement. Yes, we're practically co-owners here. Raquel needs our help managing such a big house anyway. My blood ran cold. Co-owners. Permanent arrangement. This was my house, purchased with my money, maintained with my hard work. The 2-week timeline I had offered had already morphed into something unrecognizable. I realized then that I would need to be much more explicit about my expectations, and quickly. By the end of the first week, my parents had thoroughly embedded themselves in my home. I returned from work one evening to find my carefully arranged living room completely transformed. The couch faced the opposite direction, my reading chair had disappeared into the garage, and an unfamiliar floral arrangement dominated my coffee table. "Mom, Dad, what happened in here?" I called out, dropping my briefcase in shock. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a new apron I'd never seen before. "Oh, we just made some improvements. That furniture arrangement was blocking the natural flow of energy. Your father and I read about feng shui, and this is much better." Before I could respond, I noticed something else. Where are my graduation photos that were on the mantel? Those old things, I put them in a box somewhere. They were collecting dust, and honestly, that hairstyle didn't do you any favors. I've replaced them with some lovely family portraits. I took a deep breath, trying to control my rising anger. "Mom, this is my home. You can't just change things without asking me." "Don't be so sensitive, Raquel. We're just helping. This place needed a woman's touch." I bit back the obvious retort that I was in fact a woman, and this house already had my touch all over it before they arrived. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of drilling. I rushed downstairs in my pajamas to find my father installing new light fixtures in my dining room. "Dad, stop. What are you doing?" He looked at me proudly. "Surprised. These are much better than those outdated ones you had. Energy efficient too. Will save you money on your electric bill." "That's not the point. You can't just make permanent changes to my house without permission." He shook his head. "You always overreact. We're family. What's yours is ours." That phrase, "what's yours is ours," would become a recurring theme over the coming weeks. My parents began acting less like guests and more like owners with each passing day. They answered my doorbell, accepted packages, and even began introducing themselves to my neighbors as residents, not visitors. "We're helping our daughter manage the house," I overheard my mother telling my next-door neighbor, Amanda. "She works so much she barely has time to keep up with things. Thank goodness we're here now." The final straw of week 2 came when I returned home to find 6 cars in my driveway and the sounds of a dinner party in full swing. I entered to discover my parents hosting their bridge club in my dining room. "Raquel, come meet everyone," Mom called cheerfully as if this were perfectly normal. Later that night, after the guests had gone, I confronted them. "The 2-week timeline we discussed is almost up. Have you started looking for your own place?" They exchanged glances. "Actually, honey," Dad began, "we were thinking this arrangement is working so well, why change it? Your mother and I are retired now, we can help around the house, maybe even contribute to groceries sometimes." "That wasn't our agreement," I said firmly. "I love you both, but I need my space. And speaking of space, I've noticed you've been going through my mail and personal papers in my home office." Mom looked offended. "I was just organizing. Your filing system was a mess." "Those were confidential client documents, Mom. You had no right." The conversation ended in strained silence. The next day, I discovered they had canceled their cell phone plan and redirected all their mail to my address. When I checked my mailbox, I found their new bank statements, magazine subscriptions, and even their driver's license renewals, all listing my address as their permanent residence. This wasn't a visit anymore. This was an invasion. 3 weeks into my parents' unwelcome residency, I received an email notification about a credit inquiry I hadn't authorized. According to the alert, someone had applied for a home improvement loan using my personal information. I immediately called the bank. "Yes, Miss Winston. The application was submitted yesterday," the customer service representative confirmed. "It was for $50,000 for residential renovations." My stomach dropped. I never applied for any loan. This must be fraud. After placing a freeze on my credit and filing a report, I drove home early, my mind racing. When I arrived, I found my father in my home office using my computer. "Dad, did you apply for a home improvement loan in my name?" I asked without preamble. He barely looked up. "Just a small one. We need to update that outdated kitchen of yours. Those countertops are from the Stone Age." "You committed identity theft. That's illegal." He finally turned to face me. "Don't be dramatic. We're just borrowing your good credit." Our scores took a hit helping Jake with his business ventures. "It's for improvements to a house we all live in. Everyone benefits." I was speechless. The casual way he dismissed committing fraud against his own daughter left me stunned. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Jake strolled in as if he owned the place. He headed straight for my refrigerator and began rummaging through it. "Hey sis, got any beer?" he called out, not bothering to look up. This had become a daily occurrence. Jake would drop by, raid my food supplies, lounge on my furniture, and leave a mess behind. My parents not only permitted this behavior but encouraged it. "Jake's going through a rough patch," Mom would say whenever I objected. "We need to support him right now." This particular evening, after Jake had made himself a sandwich with the last of my groceries, I pulled him aside. "Jake, what exactly happened with the business Mom and Dad gave you $280,000 from selling their house? That's a fortune. Where did it go?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Market conditions changed. Investments didn't pan out. These things happen in business." "What business exactly? Your cryptocurrency consulting firm doesn't even have a website. What service do you actually provide?" He avoided my eyes. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." That night, unable to sleep, I searched for information about Jake's supposed business. There was nothing. No registration with the state, no business license, no online presence, not even a LinkedIn profile mentioning this venture. The $280,000 had vanished into thin air. The next morning, I overheard my parents discussing Jake in the kitchen. "He's been staying at that cheap motel," my father said. "It's not safe and it's expensive. He should just move in here with us." "Raquel won't like it," my mother replied. "She'll adjust. This house has 3 bedrooms. One for us, one for her, and one that's sitting empty except for that desk she barely uses. Jake needs that room more than she needs a home office." I cleared my throat as I entered the kitchen, and they fell silent. Later that day, I discovered architectural drawings hidden among my father's things, plans for a complete renovation of my house, including converting my garage into an in-law suite and my home office into a bachelor pad. The estimated cost matched exactly the loan amount they had tried to take out in my name. That evening, my parents sat me down for what they called a family meeting. "Raquel, we've been discussing the best arrangement for everyone," Dad began formally. "Jake is struggling right now and family needs to stick together. We think he should move in here too, just until he's back on his feet," Mom continued. "Your home office could easily convert to a bedroom. You can work at the dining table." I stared at them in disbelief. "Absolutely not. This is my house, not a family compound. I've already extended your stay well beyond what we agreed to. Adding Jake is completely out of the question." Their faces hardened. "After all we've done for you your whole life," Mom said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We raised you, paid for your education, supported your career choice. This is how you repay us, by turning your back on family in need." "I haven't turned my back on anyone," I replied evenly. "But there are limits to what I can or should do. Jake is an adult. He needs to take responsibility for his own choices." Dad's face flushed with anger. "I didn't raise my daughter to be so selfish. Perhaps you need a lesson in family loyalty." From that day forward, the atmosphere in my home changed dramatically. My parents began treating me as if I were a guest in their house rather than the other way around. They used my things without asking, commented on my comings and goings, and continued making changes to my home despite my objections. One evening, I couldn't find my credit card. After searching everywhere, I checked my online account and discovered several large purchases at home improvement stores that I hadn't made. When confronted, my mother casually mentioned she'd borrowed my card because hers was maxed out. "We're family," she said dismissively. "What does it matter whose name is on the card? We're all in this together." But we weren't all in this together. I was being systematically exploited by the people who should have respected me most. The final indignity came when I returned home early from work one day to find Jake hosting 3 friends in my living room. They had ordered pizza, spilled beer on my carpet, and were loudly playing video games on my television. "What is this?" I demanded. Jake barely glanced up. "Chill, sis. Just having some downtime with the guys." "In my house without my permission when I'm not home." He shrugged. Mom and Dad said it was fine. My work began to suffer as the stress of my home situation mounted. I missed appointments, made errors in contracts, and lost focus during important client meetings. My manager noticed the change and expressed concern. I was at risk of losing clients and damaging my professional reputation. The situation reached a new low when my neighbor Amanda approached me as I collected the mail. "Raquel, is everything okay? Your mother mentioned you've been having some problems lately. She said they're staying with you because you need supervision. I froze. What exactly did she say? Amanda looked uncomfortable. She mentioned something about mental health issues. Said they were worried about you living alone. I just wanted you to know I'm here if you need anything. I thanked her stiffly and went inside shaking with fury and humiliation. My own parents were spreading rumors about my mental health to justify their presence in my home. That evening, while searching for documentation to prove my mother wrong, I discovered a letter from a law firm in my father's briefcase. They had consulted an attorney about establishing tenant rights in my home, which would make it nearly impossible to evict them without a lengthy legal process. The family who should have protected me was systematically attempting to take everything I had worked for. I thought I had seen the worst of my parents' behavior, but I was wrong. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from a particularly stressful client meeting to find the door to my bedroom ajar. I distinctly remembered locking it that morning, as I had started doing to protect what little privacy I had left. Pushing the door open, I discovered the lock had been broken. Inside, my sanctuary had been violated. My closet doors stood open, clothes rearranged according to my mother's organizational system rather than my own. My dresser drawers had been similarly reorganized. Personal items had been moved or removed entirely. "Mom," I called out, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Mom!" She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "No need to shout, Raquel. What's the matter?" "You broke into my bedroom and went through my things. That's what's the matter." She looked genuinely confused by my anger. "Broke in. Don't be ridiculous. I was just helping. Your closet was a disaster, and you had far too many unnecessary items cluttering up the space. Where are my things? My collection of vintage concert tickets. My college journals. Oh, those old papers. They were just collecting dust. I threw them away. You don't need to hold on to clutter from the past. Those old papers represented precious memories. Irreplaceable mementos of my life before this nightmare began. I felt something break inside me. You had no right, I whispered, my voice dangerously quiet. This is my home. That was my private property. Don't be so dramatic. We're family. There's no such thing as private property in a family. I turned away, unable to look at her anymore. As I did, I noticed something else, unfamiliar clothes hanging in my closet. Men's clothes. "Whose are these?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Jake moved his things in this morning," she replied casually. "It just makes sense for him to stay here now. That motel was costing a fortune." I spun around. "Jake is living here now without even asking me." "We discussed it as a family," she said defensively. "I'm part of this family and no one discussed anything with me." She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "You made your feelings clear, and we respected that by not bothering you with it again. But your father and I made an executive decision. Jake needs our help right now. Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my bedroom." She left muttering about my ingratitude. I locked the broken door as best I could and sat on my bed trembling. This had gone far beyond a family disagreement. I was being systematically pushed out of my own home. That evening at dinner, an awkward affair with Jake, now seated at my table as if he belonged there, my parents made another announcement. "We've decided to host Thanksgiving here this year," Dad stated. "The whole family. Your aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. About 30 people. Your mother's already planning the menu." "No," I said flatly. "That's not happening." "It's already decided," Mom replied smoothly. "We've sent out the invitations. Everyone's excited to see our new living arrangement." "This isn't a living arrangement," I insisted. "This is my house that you're staying in temporarily. A house that isn't big enough for 30 people for Thanksgiving or any other holiday." "We'll make it work," Dad said dismissively. "We always do." That night, alone in my room, with the dresser pushed against the broken door for security, I finally broke down. Tears I had been holding back for weeks flowed freely as I faced the truth my parents had sold their house, given away their money, and orchestrated this entire situation to force their way into my life permanently. This wasn't about family helping family. This was about control. I called my best friend Stephanie, something I should have done weeks ago, but had been too embarrassed to do. I hadn't wanted anyone to know how completely I had lost control of my own home. "Steph," I sobbed when she answered. "Everything's falling apart." "Raquel, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I poured out the whole story. My parents' unexpected arrival, The gradual takeover of my home, the financial violations, Jake's installation in my bedroom, all of it. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Raquel Stephanie finally said, her voice firm but gentle. "You're being abused." "What? No, they're my parents. They're just overbearing. Breaking into your room, throwing away your belongings, using your credit cards without permission, spreading rumors about your mental health. That's not overbearing. That's abuse. And it's illegal." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been making excuses, minimizing their behavior, blaming myself for not being more accommodating. But Stephanie was right. No amount of family loyalty justified what they were doing. "What do?" I whispered. "You need to get them out of your house. All of them. And you might need legal help to do it." The next day I called in sick to work and began investigating my brother's supposed business more thoroughly. What I discovered shocked me. Jake hadn't lost the $280,000 through failed investments or market conditions. He had gambling debts, massive ones. He had been visiting casinos and illegal gambling establishments for years, hiding his addiction from everyone. The money our parents gave him had gone directly to pay off loan sharks and bookies. As I dug deeper into my parents' finances, the picture became even clearer. They hadn't sold their house out of a desire to downsize or retire comfortably. They had been supporting Jake's gambling habit for years, draining their retirement accounts, taking out second and third mortgages on their home. Selling the house had been a last resort after they had exhausted all other resources. The most shocking discovery came when I found a printed email in my father's briefcase, a consultation with a lawyer about having me declared mentally unfit to manage my own finances. The plan detailed in my father's handwritten notes was to establish guardianship over me and my assets, effectively taking control of my house and income while continuing to support Jake's destructive lifestyle. My own parents were plotting to have me declared incompetent for financial gain. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had experienced before. I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by evidence of their deception, and made a decision. This ended now. The morning after my discoveries, I awoke with clarity and purpose. The fog of confusion and guilt that had paralyzed me for weeks had lifted, replaced by cold determination. This was my life, my home, my future at stake. I would not be a victim in my own story. I called my office and requested an emergency week of personal leave, something I had never done in my career. My manager, hearing the strain in my voice, approved it without question. I had 5 days to reclaim my life. My first action was to document everything. I took photos of the broken bedroom door lock, the changes my parents had made to my home without permission, Jake's belongings in my closet. I printed out credit card statements showing unauthorized purchases, saved the email about the fraudulent loan application, and copied the notes about having me declared mentally incompetent. Next, I created a detailed timeline of every boundary violation, every instance of financial abuse, every manipulation tactic they had employed since arriving on my doorstep that first day. The document ran to 12 pages. Seeing it all laid out chronologically made me realize how gradually they had escalated their behavior, like the proverbial frog in slowly heating water. By noon, I had secured a safe deposit box at my bank and transferred all my important documents, their birth certificate, property deed, car title, investment information, and everything I had compiled about my parents' actions. Whatever happened next, these would be beyond their reach. My next stop was a locksmith. I had all the exterior locks changed and did not order keys for anyone but myself. I also purchased and installed security cameras in the common areas of my house, carefully positioning them to respect private spaces like bathrooms, while ensuring I would have evidence of any further violations. That afternoon, I contacted a family therapist and scheduled an emergency session requesting family mediation. I texted both my parents and Jake, formally inviting them to attend. All three declined, with my father calling it unnecessary drama and my mother insisting there was nothing wrong that family couldn't solve privately. Their refusal to even consider professional intervention strengthened my resolve. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate campaign to take over my life. With therapy rejected, I moved to my next option, legal consultation. I found an attorney specializing in family law and elder issues and scheduled an appointment for the following morning. That evening, I returned home to find my parents, and Jake gathered in the living room watching my television as if nothing were wrong. No one had noticed the new exterior locks yet, since they'd been home all day. "Raquel," My mother began pleasantly. We've been discussing Thanksgiving arrangements. Do you think we should rent tables and chairs, or ask people to bring folding chairs from home? I looked at the three of them, the people who should have loved and protected me plotting instead to undermine and control me, and felt a strange calm settle over me. There will be no Thanksgiving here, I said quietly. My father muted the TV. Don't start that again. It's already decided. No, Dad, it isn't. Nothing is decided except this: you all need to find somewhere else to live immediately. Jake snorted. Yeah, right. Good luck with that, sis. I've changed the locks, I continued calmly. I've installed security cameras. I've documented every violation you've committed in my home. I've secured my financial information where you can't access it. And tomorrow I'm meeting with a lawyer to begin formal eviction proceedings if necessary. The shock on their faces might have been comical under different circumstances. You can't evict your own parents, my mother gasped. Actually, I can. You have no legal right to be here. You're not on the deed. You haven't signed a lease. You haven't paid rent. Legally, you're trespassers. We're family, Dad thundered. Family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't break into bedrooms, throw away personal possessions, use credit cards without permission, attempt to take out fraudulent loans, or try to have someone declared mentally incompetent for financial gain. Either, I replied. Steadily. But you did all that and more. Jake stood up, his face contorted with anger. You've always been selfish, always thinking you're better than everyone else with your fancy job and your perfect house. Some of us have had it harder. Some of us needed help. Help? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? You have a gambling addiction, Jake. The $280,000 Mom and Dad gave you went to bookies and loan sharks, not a business. You've been lying to all of us for years. His face went pale. That's not true. I have proof. Bank statements, transfer records, everything. I know exactly where that money went. And I know Mom and Dad have been covering for you for years, draining their retirement, mortgaging their house to the hilt. They sold their home because they had to, not because they wanted to help you with your business. My mother had begun to cry theatrical sobs that had worked on me so many times before, but now seemed transparent. How could you say such terrible things after all we've sacrificed for you? Sacrificed for me when my whole life you've favored Jake. You've bailed him out, made excuses for him, enabled his worst behavior. Meanwhile, I worked hard, built my own life, never asked for anything, and this is how you repay me. By invading my home, violating my privacy, and attempting to take everything I've worked for. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. You'll regret this, Raquel. We're your parents. We can make things very difficult for you. More difficult than you already have, I don't think so. You have 24 hours to pack your essential belongings and leave. Anything you can't take immediately can be retrieved later by appointment with my supervision. Or what Jake challenged. Or, I file police reports for identity theft, credit card fraud, vandalism, and breaking and entering. I have documentation of everything. I press charges against all of you. I get a restraining order. And I make sure every family member and friend knows exactly what you've been doing. The threat of public exposure seemed to hit them harder than anything else. My father's face went slack with shock. My mother stopped crying instantly. You wouldn't dare, she whispered. Try me, I replied, and walked out of the room. That night I slept on the couch with my purse and phone beside me, unwilling to risk another bedroom invasion. In the morning I met with the attorney Barbara Chen, who listened to my story with growing concern. Your instincts were right to document everything, she said when I'd finished. What they've done crosses several legal boundaries. The identity theft and credit card fraud alone are serious offenses. I don't necessarily want to press charges, I admitted. They're still my family. I just want them out of my house and my life until we can establish healthy boundaries. I understand. Let's start with a formal eviction notice. It states the legal grounds for eviction and gives them a timeline to vacate the premises. It also clearly outlines the consequences if they fail to comply. Will it work? They seem to think family connections trump legal rights. Barbara smiled grimly. The law doesn't recognize, but we're family, as a defense for trespassing, theft, or fraud. If they ignore the eviction notice, we escalate to court involvement. But in my experience, seeing everything formalized in legal language often provides the wake-up call people need. I left her office with 3 copies of an official-looking document, notice to quit and vacate premises, one for each unwanted occupant of my home. But the most shocking discovery was still to come. While meeting with Barbara, I received a call from my bank's fraud department. Someone had attempted to secure a home equity line of credit against my property that morning. The application included a clumsily forged signature and listed my parents as co-owners of the property, a complete fabrication. The bank had flagged it as suspicious because it contradicted their property records, which clearly showed me as the sole owner. The attempted fraud was so blatant it bordered on desperate. When I returned home, I found my parents and Jake hurriedly packing. The bank's call must have alerted them that their scheme had been discovered and the consequences were becoming real. "We've decided to give you some space," my father announced stiffly, as if it had been their idea all along. "Your attitude lately has been concerning." I handed each of them an eviction notice without comment. As Jake took his, I noticed his hands were shaking. Behind the swagger and entitlement, he looked terrified. "You don't have to do this, Raquel," my mother pleaded, holding the notice as if it might bite her. "We can work things out as a family." "We're long past that point," I replied. "You have 24 hours, as I stated yesterday. After that, I call the authorities." They were gone the next morning when I woke up, leaving behind most of their belongings but taking the keys to my car. One last petty act of revenge. I had the car rekeyed that afternoon. As I began reclaiming my home, I discovered the full extent of the financial disaster my parents had created. They had run up over $15,000 on my credit cards in just 2 months. They had attempted to take out loans totaling nearly $100,000 in my name. And most alarmingly, I found evidence they had already taken out a loan using my address as collateral and forged my signature on the documents. My journey back to safety was just beginning, but I had taken the first crucial step. I had said no to the people who thought they could take everything from me. With my house physically secured and my unwanted guests removed, I faced the daunting task of repairing the financial and legal damage they had left behind. The eviction had been just the beginning. Now I needed to systematically address each violation and protect myself from future attempts. My attorney Barbara became my most valuable ally. Under her guidance, I filed reports contesting all fraudulent credit applications and loans. I submitted formal identity theft reports with the credit bureaus and placed extended fraud alerts on my accounts. I spent hours on the phone with credit card companies disputing charges and explaining the situation. "This will take time," Barbara warned me. "Financial recovery from identity theft typically takes months, not weeks, but you've caught it relatively early, which helps." I also had to address the rumors my parents had spread about my mental health. With Barbara's help, I drafted a simple factual letter explaining that my parents had stayed with me temporarily, had attempted to establish permanent residence without my consent, and had now relocated. I sent this to neighbors and any family members who had been told falsehoods about our living arrangement. The response was illuminating. Several extended family members reached out with similar stories about my parents' enabling of Jake's destructive behavior over the years. My Aunt Caroline called to apologize. "We had no idea what they were really doing," she said. "The way they described it, they were helping you through a rough patch. I should have checked with you directly." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "They've become expert manipulators." As my support network grew, I learned more about the full extent of Jake's gambling problem. According to my cousin Michael, Jake had been banned from several casinos in the region for disruptive behavior and attempting to borrow money from other patrons. He had lost jobs due to stealing from employers to fund his addiction. The successful business ventures my parents had bragged about had all been fabrications to cover his gambling losses and their enabling. With this knowledge, I realized Jake needed professional help, not just boundaries. Through Michael, I found contact information for gambling addiction resources and sent them to Jake, making it clear that while I couldn't trust him in my home, I did care about his well-being and recovery. 1 month after the eviction, I received an unexpected call from my father. His voice sounded different, subdued, lacking the authoritative tone I'd grown accustomed to. "Raquel, we need to talk." I remained silent, waiting. "Your mother and I have been staying at a motel. We can't afford it much longer. We need help finding a place." The old me would have immediately offered solutions, taken responsibility for their housing, maybe even invited them back under stricter conditions. The new me knew better. I'm sorry to hear that, Dad. There are resources available for senior housing and financial assistance. I can email you some information. That's not what I meant, he said, his voice hardening slightly. We're your parents. We need your help directly. I understand this is difficult, I replied evenly, but I can't invite you back into my home after what happened. The trust has been broken. So you're abandoning us after everything we did for you? I took a deep breath. I'm maintaining boundaries after you violated my home, my finances, and my trust. Those are the natural consequences of your actions. I'll send you housing resources, but I won't sacrifice my safety and well-being again. He hung up without responding. A text came through moments later, not from my father, but from Jake. They're staying with me now, happy. It wasn't what I'd expected or wanted. Jake was in no position to support our parents financially or otherwise, but it was their choice to make, not mine. 2 weeks later, I received another call, this time from a number I didn't recognize. It was a social worker named Diana from Adult Protective Services. I'm reaching out because your parents have applied for emergency senior housing and services, she explained. During our intake assessment, some concerning issues came to light regarding their financial situation and your brother's involvement. I'm not surprised, I said, and proceeded to share the relevant details of our situation. Diana listened carefully, taking notes. This clarifies a lot. They presented a very different version of events. With your permission, I'd like to connect you with our financial abuse team and possibly involve law enforcement regarding the identity theft aspects. What will happen to my parents? I asked, suddenly concerned, despite everything. Our goal is to ensure their safety and well-being, which includes protecting them from financial exploitation, even if a family member is involved. We can help them access appropriate housing, financial counseling, and support services, but they need to be willing to address the enabling relationship with your brother. It was the best possible intervention, professional support without enabling. I agreed to cooperate fully. The following week brought another surprise. Jake called, his voice lacking its usual cocky edge. I messed up, Raquel, he said simply. I've been messing up for years. I know, I replied. Mom and Dad are with me, but it's not working. I can't support them. I can barely support myself. And my problem is getting worse, not better. Have you considered treatment? I asked carefully. There was a long pause. I can't afford it. I've lost everything. There are state-funded programs, Jake. It's not about money. It's about being ready to change. Another pause. Maybe I am. Ready, I mean. It was the first time in our adult lives that Jake had admitted vulnerability without immediately demanding a bailout. I felt a tiny spark of hope. I'll help you find resources, I offered. Not money, but information. Connections to people who can actually help. Thanks, he said quietly. And Raquel, I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of this. It wasn't enough. Words alone couldn't repair the damage done. But it was a start. The next phase of recovery focused on reclaiming my space. I hired professionals to repair the damage my parents had done to my home, fixing broken fixtures, repairing the bedroom door, restoring walls where they had hung items without permission. Each repair felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I also began connecting with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. Dr. Melissa Traynor helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had dominated our family dynamic for decades. You were cast in the role of the responsible one very early, she explained during one session. That created a complementary role for Jake as the irresponsible one who needed saving. Your parents reinforced these roles until they became the entire framework of your family interactions. Can it ever change? I asked. Yes, but only if everyone is willing to recognize the pattern and do the hard work of creating new ones. You've already taken the crucial first step by refusing to play your assigned role anymore. 3 months after the eviction, Adult Protective Services had helped my parents secure an apartment in a senior living community. The rent was subsidized, and the community offered transportation activities and support services. It was actually far more appropriate for their needs than my 3-bedroom house had been. Jake had entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. The process would be long and difficult, with no guarantees of success. But for the first time, he was confronting his problems rather than expecting others to solve them. As for my parents, our relationship remained strained but was slowly moving towards something healthier. With professional support and the reality check of nearly becoming homeless, they had begun to recognize the toxicity of their enabling behaviors. They still occasionally tried to guilt me, but I had learned to recognize and deflect those attempts. My home was finally mine again. My finances were recovering. And most importantly, I had found my voice and my boundaries. The painful journey had transformed me from someone who could be manipulated by family obligation into someone who understood that true family support works both ways. The final piece of evidence arrived 6 months after the eviction, a bank statement showing that my parents had indeed been nearly bankrupt due to supporting Jake's gambling. The sale of their house had been a desperate last resort, not a generous choice to help with a legitimate business. The truth, as always, was both simpler and more complex than the story they had told. 1 year after my parents first appeared on my doorstep with their suitcases and schemes, I stood in my living room surveying the space that was now completely mine again. Every trace of their invasion had been erased. The walls displayed my chosen artwork. The furniture was arranged according to my preferences. My home office, once threatened with conversion to Jake's bedroom, now housed my growing real estate business. The financial damage had been substantial, but not catastrophic. Through persistence and legal intervention, I had managed to contest most of the fraudulent charges and loan applications. My credit score had taken a hit but was gradually recovering. Most importantly, I had implemented security measures to prevent similar violations in the future. The emotional recovery had been more challenging but equally successful. Through therapy, I had come to understand the dysfunctional patterns that had defined our family dynamics for decades. I had learned to recognize guilt manipulation and entitlement behaviors for what they were. Most importantly, I had developed healthy boundaries that protected me without completely severing family ties. The healing process with my family had been slow and uneven. My parents, now settled in their senior apartment, had gradually accepted their new reality. The initial anger and blame had given way to reluctant acknowledgement of their role in the situation. They were still my parents with all the complicated history and emotional connections that entailed, but our relationship had fundamentally changed. Today marked an important milestone. I had invited them to visit my home for the first time since the eviction. Not to stay, not to reclaim territory, but to begin building a new type of relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The doorbell rang precisely at noon. I took a deep breath and opened the door to find my parents standing there. Older, somewhat diminished, but familiar. My mother held a small potted plant, instead of the entitled expectation she had carried a year ago. "Thank you for inviting us," my father said formally, the script clearly rehearsed. "We appreciate you opening your home to us." "You're welcome," I replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "It's just for lunch as we discussed." My mother handed me the plant, a housewarming gift. We should have brought one the first time. The acknowledgement, however, small, felt significant. We moved to the dining room where I had prepared a simple meal. The conversation was initially stilted, focused on safe topics like the weather and neighborhood developments. Gradually, we moved to more substantive matters. "How is Jake doing?" I asked, broaching the subject that had been at the heart of our family dysfunction. My parents exchanged glances. "He's 6 months sober from gambling," my mother said. "The program has been good for him. He's working part-time at a hardware store. It's not much, but it's honest work. He's taking responsibility," my father added, the words seeming difficult for him. "Something we should have required years ago." I nodded, acknowledging the admission without demanding more. "And how are you finding your apartment?" "It's small," my mother admitted, "but the social activities keep us busy. Your father has joined a chess club. I'm taking water aerobics. The financial counseling has been educational." My father added his expression, suggesting the process had been humbling. "We should have been more careful with our retirement planning." "We all make mistakes," I offered. "The important thing is learning from them." As lunch progressed, the tension gradually eased. We weren't the same family we had been before the crisis, but perhaps we were becoming something healthier. When they prepared to leave precisely at the 2-hour mark we had agreed upon, my mother hesitated at the door. "Raquel, I want to say something." She took a deep breath. "What we did was wrong. We violated your trust and your home. We put Jake's needs above yours in ways that weren't fair or right. I'm sorry." The apology, though belated, was sincere. My father nodded in agreement, adding his own acknowledgement. "We took advantage of your sense of family obligation. We shouldn't have done that." No, you shouldn't have. I agreed. But I appreciate you recognizing that now. After they left, I sat in my reclaimed space and reflected on how far we had all come. The crisis had forced changes that had been necessary for years. Jake was finally addressing his addiction. My parents were learning to live within their means and respect boundaries, and I had found strength I never knew I possessed. 3 months later, we attempted a family dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant near my parents' apartment complex. Jake joined us looking healthier than I had seen him in years. The gambling treatment program had given him tools not just for addressing his addiction, but for building a more honest life overall. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said when we had a moment alone. "What happened with your house? That was the wake-up call I needed. Seeing how far Mom and Dad had gone, how much they'd sacrificed for my addiction, it finally got through to me. So in a weird way, I have you to thank." "I didn't do it for you," I reminded him. "I know. You did it for yourself, which is what made it effective. You stopped the enabling cycle when no one else could." His insight surprised me. The Jake of a year ago would never have had such clarity or taken such responsibility. Over the following year, our family continued the slow process of rebuilding on healthier terms. My parents eventually moved to a different senior community that better suited their needs and budget. Jake maintained his sobriety, gradually rebuilding his life one day at a time. And I thrived both professionally and personally, no longer burdened by toxic family dynamics. The most profound change was internal. I had learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That family loyalty doesn't mean surrendering your well-being. That love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's exploitation. These lessons, though painfully acquired, had transformed me. On the second anniversary of that fateful doorbell ring, I hosted a housewarming party. Not because I had moved, but because I had finally completely reclaimed my space, physically, financially, and emotionally. Friends and select family members gathered to celebrate not just my home, but my journey. As I looked around at the people who had supported me through the crisis, and those who had earned their way back into my life through genuine change, I felt a deep sense of peace. The betrayal had been real and painful, but it hadn't defined me. My response to it had. My home was truly mine again. Not just the physical structure with its walls and rooms, but the sanctuary it represented. The place where I could be completely myself, safe in the knowledge that my boundaries would be respected and my voice would be heard. The journey had been difficult, but the destination was worth every painful step. I had lost the family I thought I had, but gained something more valuable, the family we could actually become, built on mutual respect rather than obligation and exploitation. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who crossed the line? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself even against family. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, true family supports your growth, not your exploitation.